Good morning, and welcome back to Flashback Friday on Gaming with ADHD. Today we're going to take a short look at something that's been in my collection for about 25 years now, the GURPS role-playing game in Portuguese. Now, of my entire collection of gaming stuff, this is probably the thing that I purchased the farthest away from home. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with GURPS, it saw first and second editions originally released in 1986, a third edition released in 1988, and a fourth edition released in 2004. And while it wasn't the first generic role-playing game, at the time, it was pretty much the most popular. So why am I showing these books off? Well, from 1996 to 1998, I was a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I was serving in the São Paulo East Mission. Now, I don't remember how I ended up in this store, but somehow I found what was probably the only comic book and game store in the city of São Paulo. And it reminded me of a comic shop that I would go to back home. Now, keep in mind, this would have been about 1997. Geek culture and role-playing games in general were not quite the thing that they are today. But I had heard of GURPS in high school, and when I saw these books on the shelf, I decided that I had to pick them up. But a little bit of backstory. In 1991, De Vir Livraria, a small importer of games and comics, licensed and translated the third edition of GURPS from Steve Jackson Games. De Vir would continue to translate and publish further editions of GURPS until 2017. Now, when I think about games, I don't think about who won or lost. Instead, I try to think about the memories of who I was playing with or why a game was important to me. But even then, why is this game important? Well, that has a lot to do with when I got the books. I'll be honest, I haven't played, I've actually never played GURPS. But at the time, I was in a completely different country. I was speaking a completely different language. And while there were plenty of things I could read in Portuguese to practice my language, or people that I could talk to, this was something different and something that I related to a little bit more. So let's take a look at this, and I also have the GURPS Illuminati book. Bet you didn't see that coming. And I want to just point out a couple of things. I'm not really going to review the game system. There's lots of information about that. I mean, I'll probably go over some of it while I'm looking at the books. But I find it really interesting because they did some things with these books that I've honestly never seen anywhere else. Now, one thing to keep in mind with Portuguese, when you translate from English, it ends up being what I've found and what I've been told, it ends up being about 30% longer, and that's physically longer, than a comparable sentence in English. And one of the features to GURPS was that as a generic system, they would put out books that would cross-reference each other. Everything was indexed. There would be references within the book. And, at the time, because they were importing a lot of books, that meant they were also bringing in a lot of books just in English. They weren't translating everything. And so if they're bringing in things in English, but then also translating things, how do you keep it consistent, especially when you have customers that most likely have both English and Portuguese versions on their shelves? So, the first thing I would want to point out is, and I'm actually going to flip these because of my infamously small working area. So these books are a little bit more than 12 inches wide, or tall, and then about 9 inches wide. Now, I have here the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons Player's Handbook, which most of the gaming books that I have on my shelf are about this size. Maybe a little narrower or a little taller or a little shorter, but for all intents and purposes, they're approximately this size. But if I put this on top of one of these Brazilian GURPS books, you can see you end up with about a 1/2 inch wider and about an inch to 1.5 inch taller book. Now, the reason that they did that is because of that indexing that I was talking about. And actually, and you actually see that in the source books. So, as an example, let me find one. I probably should have found that first, but ADHD. We just, deal with it as it comes up. So what I'm looking for is one of those references to another book. Which I am not seeming to find. Okay. Well, apparently this is not going to work. So I will just go back to... Here's a great piece of art. They describe in the back of the book that with the indexing, everything referenced a specific page. So it would reference the basic module on page 175 or on page 207. And so with that indexing system going across the entire GURPS line, they needed to maintain the page count, and they needed to maintain what content was on those pages. So what they would even do is, beyond just making a larger book, they actually changed the font size from page to page. So if you look at these two pages, and let's get it a little bit closer, you can see that the lines don't actually match up very well. So the lines on this page don't line up exactly with the lines on the page prior. And that's because they would even change the font size to make sure that they fit everything that was supposed to be on that page on the page. So DeVere would go on to translate 16 different source books, including GURPS Cyberpunks, GURPS Imperio Romano, or Imperial Rome, GURPS Magia, or Magic, GURPS Viagem Espacial, or GURPS Space. They would even publish their own source books and adventures under the line Mini GURPS, which included titles such as GURPS Entradas y Bandeirantes, about exploring and conquering Brazil, or GURPS O Resgate do Retirantes, or the Rescue of Retirantes, which is a painting by Cândido Portinari, who was a Brazilian artist in the early 20th century. So they would actually put out content related to Brazil itself. And that was something that I did see quite a bit when I was there, is that Brazil is very proud of who they are as a country, who they are as a people. And they would do things like that. And I thought that was really cool that they actually worked that into the role-playing games. Now, I remember reading these books. I remember having to look up words and learn new vocabulary that I wouldn't have learned without these books. But today, I mostly remember a time in my life that was a lot simpler, a lot more structured, and in a place and with people that I grew to love. Since that time, I've met more Brazilians at game conventions, and we've been able to talk about games like this that we shared, even though we were from completely different countries, completely different cultures. It's pretty amazing the different connections that you can make over the game table. You can make lifelong friends. You can find solutions to problems. You can find ways to make things a little better. And as I said in my last video, the world needs more people at the table. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing here, I would absolutely love it if you subscribe to the channel and came along. I keep trying to put up different and interesting things that I've got in my gaming collection, things that I'm trying to do, and I hope you enjoy it. So, thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.